What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Dynasty Gambit. Today, we're going to be talking about some best ball strategy, and we've got a special guest here with us to discuss. What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Our first kind of show of the 2026 off season. We got a special guest here. Am I saying this correctly? Arman or Arman?
Arman is how I pronounce it.
Okay, Arman. All right, Arman here from FanCred, founder of FanCred, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
Yeah, I played in a league with him this year, a best ball league, which gave me the idea to have him on for this show. And he actually sponsored the league. His company sponsored that league. So that was a fun time. We're going to get into just discussing kind of some different strategies related to best ball, how it's different from your typical lineup league as it relates to both Dynasty and redraft. So we're going to be less getting into sort of your underdog DraftKings type of best ball and more talking about leagues. So instead of like trying to compete against thousands of other people, how do you get an edge over your 9 or 11 or 13 other league mates. And so we're going to kind of talk about how draft strategy is different. Positional advantages can be different. The roster construction can certainly be different. So we're going to get into a little bit of that. But yeah, Arman, do you want to introduce yourself and then just talk a little bit about what your typical best ball strategies look like?
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for having me on the show, Austin. My name's Arman. I'm the founder of FanCred, your one-stop shop for league payments and also just to check your credibility. I think fantasy sports needs a little bit more visible trust, and that's what we're trying to bring to the table with FanCred. As far as draft strategy differences, there is a significant amount of difference when I'm drafting for a lineup league versus a best ball league, right? I think lineups, I'm really looking for studs because that's all I'm focused on playing week to week. Whereas in best ball, you have a little bit more wiggle room to draft. Maybe instead of a stud, maybe you replace that with two, like just right after that tier. So I think breadth is more important than depth when it comes to best ball lineups, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting. I think that there's a lot of guys that I think people shy away from. And I think Jameson Williams is like an example of like, people are like, man, I hate to have him in my lineup when he scores 0. I only want to have him in my lineup when he scores 30. Well, best ball fixes that for you because he will only be in your lineup when he scores 30. And so I think some of those guys with the massive boom potential have increased value in best ball because you don't have to worry about, is this the game where he's going to go for 80 yards and a touchdown on one play? Because he'll be in there on the games that he does because that's just how the format is set up. And I think that lends itself. I think, for example, in our league, which we'll get into here in a little bit, I had Sean Tucker, who basically never made my lineup most of the year, but then he had one game where he scored almost 40 points and he was in there for that. So it's stuff like that where you have guys that have somewhat of a limited role, but you can pick them in the late rounds. And, if they get opportunity or if they get have their breakout game, you can get them into the lineup. So I do think it changes the way you look at things a little bit. One thing I've noticed, and you can let me know if this is something you have seen from your time playing best ball, is that in lineup leagues, a lot of times I want the end of my bench to be backup running backs, or if you're in like a deep super flex league, backup quarterbacks, because it's like these guys have the opportunity to get increased workload, like to have a massive value increase if a guy in front of them goes down with injury. And I'm less interested in having, wide receiver 3s or big play guys when I'm in a lineup league. But in best ball, I think that's reversed. I don't want a guy who's going to most weeks put up 0 or have no opportunity, and I'm banking on an injury because it's taking up a roster spot. Less opportunity to get into my lineup. right? Because unless the guy in front of him gets hurt, he's probably not going to score enough points to be in my lineup. Whereas guys backfilling guys like this past year, like Trey Tucker, or even I don't know, like Josh Reynolds type players, where it's like these players that are up and down that you would basically never. There's really no scenario where you're going to put them in your lineup in a lineup league, but they have the potential to score a lot of points. And so I think the wide receivers, at least the late round wide receivers, to me have an increased value in best ball when they're the type of guys that end up clogging your roster when you're doing lineup. Was that
For sure. For sure. I think Alex Pierce was one that I targeted pretty often. Alec Pierce. I know I automatically say Alex, but a lot of people, he's kind of considered the third wide receiver in that Colts roster, but he really balled out this year for my best ball leagues. And like I said, breadth is very important. I wouldn't completely discount backup running backs.
Yeah.
I think maybe if you expect some injuries on the starter there, maybe like that's a good bet to make. It might not pay off, but if it does pay off, it pays off in a big way.
Yeah, that's true. I think it probably also depends on roster size, right? Like if you're talking about you only have 16, 17 roster spots, every spot is that much more valuable as far as like you don't want to have a guy that's scoring 0 most weeks on your bench. But if you're talking about a 30 man roster, there's a little bit more flexibility to experiment with guys like that. So yeah, I like that. I think that's a good perspective. Do you find typically that so let's say a super flex, a dynasty super flex best ball league, what have you found is some of the difference in value with backup quarterbacks? I know a lot of times in lineup dynasty leagues you'll see, let's assume like somewhere between a 25 and 30 man roster, you'll see a lot of basically all the backups go at the end of a startup. Do you find that to be a little different with best ball, and do you think that's smart, or what is your experience with that?
Oh man, that is a good question. I think in best ball, it's probably less important to have your QB in Superflex best ball. That's just my opinion, because you're going to get the best players in that Superflex slot anyway. But like in a lineup league, right? Say your QB goes down and you do have a backup quarterback, you tend to focus on that more. But I think it's okay to put a little less focus on there. I haven't had a situation, I guess, that gives me a data point on that. So I'll have to focus on that more. That's a good question.
Yeah. I think that's interesting because you pointed out the quarterback in general, right? So not even just the backup quarterback. I do think there is, if you're in a league with one quarterback, one super flex. Now two quarterbacks can be a little different, but if it's one quarterback and one super flex, I do think that QB2 is a little bit less important because you're able to, because I think when you're in a lineup league, you pretty much every week, assuming you don't have some kind of wonky scoring settings, you're going to want to have two quarterbacks in there as much as you can. Just because you're maximizing your projections, you're maximizing your opportunity. Most weeks, quarterbacks are going to score the most. But if you have a lot of good wide receivers, a lot of boom potential wide receivers, even some running backs on your bench with good potential, you might find even if you have 2 or 3 quarterbacks that only one of them is making your lineup in a lot of weeks. So I think sometimes people think of Superflex in lineup leagues, and rightfully so, but think of Superflex as basically 2 quarterback. But I do think that changes a little bit in best ball. And I think has a ripple effect down the line of quarterbacks all the way down to those backup quarterbacks that make them a little bit less valuable. Now, I do also think another impact is whether you have a league that has locked transactions. Can you pick up guys on waivers or do trades during the season? Because if you can't, sometimes you do want to build in a little bit of flexibility for yourself. Like if you have a quarterback or 2 that get hurt early in the season, that you're not completely screwed. So I do think that changes things a little bit as well.
Like for sure. Like if I only have one healthy QB, there's no way I'm not trying to make a move for another one, even if it's just a backup. You still have to care for it. But yeah, best ball, I tend to, maybe I'll sacrifice the second QB for maybe like 3 wide receiver 3s, and that breadth alone could could end up winning you
Yeah,
more games than not.
that's a good point. Because the last thing you want to do is have all of your value be in 3 or 4 quarterbacks, and then really at max only 2 of them can make your lineup, and then you're having you're having people in your lineup scoring 7 or 8 points, and you have 20-point scorer that didn't even make your lineup just the way it's set up. So yeah,
For sure.
sometimes the insurance can actually be what hurts you. And if you're talking about a best ball league it's basically just your cumulative points for the season. I know some people they'll still have like weekly matchups and playoffs and everything. So that does change things a little bit. But if you're talking about a full league, first place is all that matters. Whoever scores the most points throughout the year, then, you want to maximize your upside. And if you're playing it safe with, packing in tons of quarterbacks, you're probably not going to finish last, but who cares if you finish fifth? That doesn't matter.
Totally. And,
Right.
Austin, I think you know what you're talking about, because in that FanCred sponsored league, you ended up winning. It was cumulative weeks 1 through 17. Austin pretty much had it in the bag the whole way. He got a little worried at the end, but
you were catching me. We'll look at that, because I think we were talking before the show. We looked, and if we had had week 18 as part of it, you actually would have caught me and won the league. So,
which boggles my mind. I credit all the credit to Parker Washington. That's one of those like wide receiver threes at the end of my roster that I was like, I think this guy is going to be valuable than any backup QB or running back, and it proved to be right. So
that's a perfect example of one of those guys that provides that, as you call it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that the interesting thing that I've found with a lot of best ball leagues is that there's kind of some ebbs and flows in a season. So you'll have early on in the season, there seems to be like a guy that seems like is a huge smash hit and then tapers off. And obviously it's the same way with the lineup, but we're talking about guys that are in lineup. So like, for instance, a guy like Parker Washington or Alec Pierce, let's say they start off the season with 4 or 5 really good weeks. They've been in your lineup as opposed to being like frustrating guys on your bench. And so I think that increases their value to other teams. So assuming you have assuming you're able to make trades, what are some ways that you try to kind of manipulate the market? Like you have a guy that was unexpected and going off early in the season. Are those the type of guys you're looking to move, or are you trying to ride that as much as possible typically?
It depends on like, especially if it's dynasty, long-term value obviously comes into play, right? With a Parker Washington, I'm actually holding, because I do like, even though it's a crowded wide receiver room, I do like his value going forward. I've heard Trevor Lawrence speak highly of him all the time. So it depends there. But if it's just a redraft league or something like that, one thing that I'll try to look for is like who has shares in this wide receiver room. And if I'm ready to move the player, it's usually a good bet that maybe the owner will be interested just to get that sort of like coverage on a single team. I think that's a little different. In lineup, you would not want kind of shares of a team too much, but in best ball, it's actually like, well, it makes sense. One of these guys is going to pop off. Right. Let me get that share of that team.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think it's very smart. I agree on Parker Washington. I think he's played well enough down the stretch. I mean, he would look like the alpha in the playoff game, to be honest.
Oh, yeah.
It wouldn't shock me if Travis Hunter ends up playing a lot more corner next year.
Oh yeah. I think they should. They want to build their team wisely.
Yeah, from a fantasy perspective, we want to see Travis Hunter play wide receiver, but it might be smart to have him focus on DB. But
that's why I had 0 shares of him.
I think I have 2. But they're in smaller leagues, and I'm not counting on him. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, if he pops off, that's great. But
are you trying to sell, or
I think it's hard to sell right now. You just got to hold and hope that his 25-point game or whatever it was the week before he got hurt is more of a sign of things to come than all the games before that.
Oh yeah.
But yeah. Yeah, so I think that you mentioned kind of getting a bunch of shares from the same team. It seems like over the last couple of years, kind of all the rage with best ball has been stacking your quarterback with wide receivers. It seems to be a popular strategy, especially with big tournaments.
Hmm.
Like sort of in an underdog or DraftKings style, um, big tournaments where it's like thousands of people and you're just trying to, win $1 million, whatever it is. But what would you say with a small league where you're playing against even like a 14 team league, but just a league where you're just playing against the other people in your league? Do you still think stacking gives you a second quarterback with wide receivers gives you that same advantage, or do you think it actually can limit your upside? Because I've heard takes both ways on this. I'm curious what you think.
Um, for me, it depends on the quality of that stack. Like I think
Yeah.
solely on the quality of the QB. Um, I think QB and wide receiver stacks are more of a psychological advantage because when you're watching the game, throws a touchdown to the wide receiver, you're just like, awesome. That is like double the points. But if you look at it from a week to week basis, if you just had like a similar other quarterback, it ends up kind of washing out. So I wouldn't reach per se to get my stack. The value still has to be there in the draft. So I'm in the camp of like it's a little overinflated in terms of how people perceive the QB wide receiver stack.
Yeah, I agree with that. So to me, I use it more of a tiebreaker. So it's like if there's two guys in the same tier, but I already have the quarterback, I'll go ahead and take the wide receiver that completes the stack. But sometimes you'll see people making some wild reaches just to get a stack, and I think that ends up being counterintuitive to the value play. So it's like if the value's there, if there's a couple guys in the same tier you're choosing from, I think it can help. I also think that uh, I think this was I'm trying to remember who I was listening. I think it was Scott Connor was talking about this. He was saying that stacks like a Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase stack
Oof.
doesn't actually help you as much, right? It's actually it gets you a lot of points, but you're probably not drafting them at a value anywhere. You're
Right.
basically just getting the players in that tier. But what the stack that really makes a difference is sort of stacking your tight end two or your last flex spot with your quarterback because it's a guy that you're not counting on as much. And of course, now it's a little different with best ball, but like there's still like a guy that you're a bench guy, like one of those bench guys. You're like, okay, if your quarterback has a big game, he might have a big game too. So a guy
Mm-hmm.
that you're expecting to kind of just barely crack your lineup can be a more important stack because
Oh, for
what you're
sure.
looking at is you're looking at if you're doing dart throws anyway, right? It's going to be a dart throw guy. Might as well have one that's connected to your quarterback. And so I think that strategy seems to make sense. And I try to like late in the
Oh,
draft if there's wide receiver 3 and 4 that are connected to my quarterback, it's something I
that makes
say.
a ton of sense. I think it's a lot lower risk at the end of the draft, and so when you when you go for that stack, right, the risk to value ratio is increased, right, or decreased. I don't know. I gotta look at the graph on
Yeah,
there, but it's better
right.
for you to do that as opposed to earlier rounds. So I 100% agree with that.
Yeah. All right. Well, looks like we're pretty much on the same page there. We finished first and second in that best ball league we're about to show. So that
We
was
know what we're talking about.
that was awesome. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and share. We're gonna look at the draft that we did and kind of talk about each our strategies and how we kind of built our teams, and then see if that starts some more conversation here. Let me share my screen here.
By
All
the
right.
way, Dynasty Best Ball to me is my favorite format. You get all the benefits of Best Ball where you're looking at a lot of players and um, you're just focused on roster construction. And to me, that is the best part of fantasy. So,
Well, it's fun because I feel like you can get more edges that way. I think
oh,
it's
yeah.
because I'm the type of guy I love in the off season. My 25th through 30th roster spot are being switched out for the next kind of like prospect guy that comes in there. But I know in a lineup league, that guy's never going to play for me.
Oh, yeah.
Stacking my IR spots, stacking my taxi spots, but most of the time these guys are never going to play. But it makes a bigger difference in best ball. Like every single roster spot means something in any league, but I think even more so in best ball.
100%.
So let's take a look what you did here. So let's keep in mind this was a or it was a quarterback and a super flex, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, 3 flex, tight end, and then I think we had
Good amount of bench spots. This was pretty deep.
Yeah, so it's
Pretty big
22
roster.
total, so about 10 on the bench. Let me see if I can let me switch it to your team here too. So you started off with going Lamar Jackson.
Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I went heavy on Lamar Jackson this year, and it shows with 0 championships.
Yeah, but I mean, I think a lot of people. I think it was pretty consensus. Now, this was also redraft, so Jaden Daniels is a little lower, I think, than it was pretty consensus that Allen and Jackson were the first two quarterbacks in a redraft league. So taking him at 102, I think was pretty much consensus. You got decent value on Bo Nix coming back, and then obviously getting JSN at 313 because we did a third round reversal. So this is all the way at the end of the third round. That obviously was a huge factor for you. I'm sure you were happy about that as a Seahawks fan too.
Yeah, I'm looking at these top 4 picks, and I did really well. Obviously, even if you do well in the drafts, Lamar Jackson not panning out hugely affected. But yeah, I think going QB with the first 2 picks, it lends to my strategy of like breadth, because I think even though I don't land a stud wide receiver in those first 2 rounds, I can make up with it with like, some tier down guys. As long as I like the variance between wide receivers is so high that I think, the performances between those guys is going to match that of a single stud.
Yeah. Yeah. And you lock up that quarterback position. You don't have to worry about it that much. Let's see. I don't even know.
Yeah.
You didn't draft another one.
Parker Washington right there at the bottom.
Yeah. So, I mean, even and you were the fact that you were able to you still finished a close second on the season with Lamar Jackson missing a bunch of games goes to show like you were able to patchwork together enough in the super flex spot, to finish second in a 14-team league where, good 5-6 weeks of the season you only had one quarterback even playing. So I think that goes to show sometimes when you combine quarterback early and then no backup quarterbacks, it can actually work out really well for you. So I think that's a good case in point there. So you did the stack. You got Sutton with Nix.
I think Sutton was a good value this year. So I went for it for the stack in that point. I think it might have been the tiebreaker there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're talking about in that same range, there was Devontae Smith, Xavier Worthy, DJ Moore, George Pickens obviously was.
Oh man,
was a steal. But still, I mean, like that range definitely was not a reach. ETN was a good value there. You also had Bigsby, so you kind of like hedged your bet there that one of them would have a big season, and ETN was the one that did it.
Right, and that during that time, there was like uncertainty in that backfield, right?
There was.
And I knew one of them was going to pan out with the Liam Cohn hire, so I said, get both of them.
I was excited about Bigsby. I really was going into the season, and not only did he not take over the job, but they just basically gave him away to the Eagles for nothing. That was a plot twist for sure.
Yeah.
And you got some backup. You did backup running backs, kind of mixed in with some high upside wide receivers: Tisla, Yoshivas, Josh Reynolds,
Gainwell. Yeah, see the bottom here, Gainwell and Parker. That's why I ended up second.
Those two were huge. Yeah, Gainwell was a nice breakout, and he's one of those guys that was somewhat frustrating a lot of the year for lineup managers.
Oh yeah,
but great in best ball.
Like imagine you're a lineup manager versus a best ball manager, right? You're like, if you're a lineup manager, Gainwell is very low on your rankings, but if you're a best ball manager, Gainwell rises a ton. It's just such a different game. That illustrates how different it is.
And being able to get a difference maker that put up multiple, like close to 30 point. We had one, I know, the game in was it in Germany, where Warren didn't play or was like ruled out at the last minute. He scored like 35.
Oh yeah.
And then we had a couple other big games as well. So those games coming from your 20th round draft pick are massive. And obviously Parker Washington at the end of the season, same thing. So you can definitely see how this was a contending team. I want to kind of compare to what I did. It's interesting because we did a similar thing but different. I would have probably gone running back or quarterback early, but I didn't have the luxury because I was picking back here at 11.
Oh yeah.
And I didn't want to reach, for like I would have had to reach for, Bo Nix or
Drake May,
which
Oh,
I
yeah.
think May would have been fine, but at the time it felt like a reach at 111. So I decided to
Oh,
pivot and go running back. I went
you
Jameer Gibbs,
nailed them.
ended up getting McCaffrey in the second round,
Oh,
which
yeah.
obviously was the core, ended up being the core of my team. And then I basically kind of ignored running back for a long time. I just was like, all right, I'm banking on in this 14 team league, if I'm gonna win, these two guys are gonna have good seasons. And if they don't, then I'm probably not gonna win anyway. So let's build around the
Mhm.
other positions. Um, and I took a lot of high upside receivers. Honestly, a lot of wide receivers didn't work out very well. McConkey, I wish I had taken JSN there instead of McConkey, obviously. Um,
Oh,
Travis
Hunter.
Hunter. Igbuka had a good stretch at the beginning of the season. Matthew Golden did basically nothing. But I was able to like Alec Pierce, Quentin Johnston, Trey Tucker.
I see what you did though. Like you're going for those high upside young wide receivers and getting a lot of them to kind of cover your wide receiver room. Yeah.
Right, just ended up and it goes to show, I think, that they don't even all have to hit, or even most of them don't have to hit. That
Mhm.
it ended up being kind of these guys further down here that hit my lineup a lot of weeks. Trey Tucker had some massive weeks. Alec Pierce had some massive weeks. Quentin Johnston had some
Even QJ early on was
yeah.
pretty good.
And then I think one of the things I'm most proud of is hitting, the tight ends, getting Ferguson and Harold Fannin.
Oh,
Kind of the
nice.
way it worked out, Ferguson started off super hot. He was a tight end one for a lot of the early season. And then by the time he tapered off, Harold Fannin was breaking out. So it was like one or the other of them had a big week just about every week. So that worked out really well.
Oh yeah.
Waiting on the quarterback, I got Justin Fields. Obviously, early in the season that worked well, but he was benched and hurt, combination of both. But both Jordan Love and Sam Darnold, getting them in the 5th and 6th. I mean, it was kind of like the end of the quarterback run. Aaron Rodgers got taken. Smith got taken before Darnold. So Darnold ended up being pretty good value for me.
Oh yeah.
So even though those quarterbacks weren't great, it was enough to sustain me. I also took Anthony Richardson flyer there that obviously didn't pan out, but it's
That's
just one
quite
of
a
those things.
that's quite a like data point right here to point out. You won the league, and with those three quarterbacks, if you told people these are the quarterbacks I drafted, they're like, oh, you're a little weak. You're
Yeah.
probably not gonna win. So that's very, very interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's just sort of, I think there were a lot of weeks where like we talked about, somebody else was in the super flex spot. I mean, Sam
Mm.
Darnold was very up or down. He had some nice 25-point weeks, but he had some weeks where he was scoring 3 or 4 points. And I'm sure that he was not in the, he didn't make it those weeks. But like I had Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt, had a couple big games, but mostly didn't do much. Sean Tucker, a couple big games, mostly didn't do much. So the fact that I was able to have those two anchor running backs, McCaffrey obviously was an absolute stud. Gibbs was rock solid and consistent as well. So having those two running backs as an anchor allowed me flexibility to just draft high upside guys at other positions. The tight ends ended up helping me a lot. I feel like I just got a lot of really good value throughout the draft. And so I think that's kind of I think we had a similar strategy, but
Mhm.
you were doing the same thing with quarterbacks that I was doing with running backs. So it's like getting
Right.
your studs early and then not having to worry about it the
And
rest of the
that
way.
that might have been because of draft position, right? Like I'm at the top, let me
Yeah,
go get the QBs. You're here at the
yeah,
end, let me go get the running back. So that
exactly. I think if I was in your position, I probably would have done something very similar. So I think it goes to show, kind of figure out where you're at. Don't reach for a position that everybody else is taking. Figure out your position where you can get the advantage at, and then that allows you so much flexibility for the rest of the draft. So I think that's a fun exercise to kind of go back
yeah,
and look.
that was
And what's
cool.
interesting is with this league, we did no trades and no transactions. So those were our rosters for the
Literally
full.
one and done.
Yeah,
Yep.
so that was fun. Um, any other thoughts as far as best ball? Any other tips that our listeners might be interested in? Anything else to add?
I'd say for those, play people that love setting lineups and that give best ball a try. People think it's pretty cheap to just have the best lineup out there, but I'm a big advocate for best ball. I think it's the best format. Dynasty best ball is the best format because you really focus on the players. You really a Jameson Williams, Parker Washington, like these players back, or maybe Jameson Williams had a little bit more credibility this year, but like those players you would never start in a lineup league. So it makes you think about more players. It raises the floor of more players. And honestly, when a player gets injured in your lineup, that's one of the worst feelings, right? That goes away in best ball. So I don't think it cheapens it. I think it just elevates the game. So I'm a huge advocate for best ball, Dynasty in particular, because it's roster construction like all the time. So
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that a lot of people will say, "Oh, it's kind of the easy way out. There's less strategy because you don't have to think about setting your lineup." But in a lot of ways, a lot of the variance, a lot of the luck related to fantasy football has to do with starting a guy that gets hurt in the first quarter or something like that. Like, and you take a lot of that out where you really have the people that really constructed their rosters the best, that made contingency plans, that have everything set up for a whole season of success, end up winning. So in some ways, there's actually more strategy and more skill involved in best ball. So I think on the surface it may not seem that way, but once you kind of get into a couple leagues and you start playing, you realize, oh, okay, there definitely is a level of the better players tend to win. The people that draft better tend to win. The people that roster construct better tend to win. And it takes some of the luck and variance out of it. Now,
yeah,
the example we used, I won. There's plenty of best ball leagues I don't win.
you're in your own horn.
So I'm not saying, but I'm just saying in general, it eliminates some of the variance.
I mean, in the other FanCred sponsored game, we did a Survivor League. Austin ended up winning that too. So I think he could claim he's got a lot of credibility. So yeah,
I appreciate that. Appreciate you putting those together. It's always been fun playing in a bunch of different leagues, especially with other content creators, because you get to see some different strategies, some different personalities. So I appreciate you putting that together, and appreciate you being on the show with me today and going over some of this. And we'll hopefully have you on again at some point here in the future.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Is a fun league to be a part of, and I got to meet a lot of great people. And FanCred will be hosting another community captains league. It might look a little different format wise, but yeah, be on the lookout for that.
Heck yeah, I'll be looking forward to it. All righty, well, appreciate you being on, and appreciate you guys listening. Don't forget to follow and subscribe. But where can the people find you, Arman?
Go to fancred.app. That website has everything you want to learn about FanCred. Our mission is really to bring trust and credibility, to be more transparent and visible amongst the fantasy community online. So the goal is to really just provide the best tools for fantasy commissioners to handle payments, manage members, and then when you consistently rate your commissioner and league mates over time, we hope that that builds a layer of trust in fantasy. So you're jumping into a quality league, and that you have commissioners that you could trust. And so that's our mission at FanCred. If you're looking for a way to manage your league payments, please check us out at fancred.app. You'll see all the socials for me on the bottom of that website. So hope to see you there.
Good stuff. Yeah. Arman's he's active in our Discord at Dynasty Gambit. So you could interact with him there as well. We always appreciate people being active in there. We have just right before I came on, I was in a couple different lively discussions on different things related to the 2026 draft class. So it's a good, it keeps me distracted from work throughout the day a lot. So it's a fun Discord to be a part of, and I appreciate everybody for being part of it. And we'll be announcing more content in there in the coming days and weeks, and appreciate you guys listening, and have a good day.
Yeah, thanks. Bye-bye.